shimmies that you hear in the background. I promise it is nothing nefarious, certainly no bodies that we're trying to dispose of before the landlords inspect our apartment. So the subject of my talk today is all about group work and how fraught that can feel, especially when you are doing it with people you have literally just met on things that you don't have any experience with. And the way I want to frame what I have to say today is with regards to the times when we find ourselves being pointy within a dynamic and the times that we find ourselves being soft. You know, it's really context dependent. Sometimes we find that the people that we work with just kind of make us feel bad, maybe without even intending to, or maybe we find that our working style is described as intense or very demanding, and that can be difficult for other people to work with. And so what I want to do today is just offer some thoughts about ways that we can mitigate this sort of dynamic when working with each other. And so I want to start off with a little prompt for all of you. So I want you to just think about this for a minute. Accepting the premise that saying do unto others as you would have them do unto you is not enough to create a welcoming and equitable environment for collaboration. What is missing? That is to say, we all start from a base state of wanting to be good teammates to each other and wanting everyone to feel welcome. But obviously, through, talking to people and observing the state of science today, it's not quite enough. So what is not enough about it? Now, I'm not sure what the best way to get your responses to this prompt are, but if you have this meeting open in Zoom on your laptop, then I would love for you to wait for me to count down 3, 2, 1, go, and post your response in the Zoom chat when I say go. And if you don't have your Zoom chat open, then maybe just think about what your answer to this might be. And I don't know, share it with the person next to you. But I'm going to give everyone a minute to think about it and open up the Zoom chat window and type it out. And then when I say go, I want to see a big flood of responses. And so this is potentially a tricky prompt because, I know many people who think that this saying, is enough and that the world needs to figure out how to make its working style work, given that we're all starting with best intentions. So I'm asking you to maybe accept this premise, even if you don't by default believe in it. Just try to get into the head of someone who doesn't feel this is enough and think about what they might say about what we can do better. So I'll give you a minute or two while I listen to my partner make a smoothie with all of the different things we find in our fridge before we need to vacate in 24 hours. I hope you enjoyed pondering this question. I enjoyed pondering it. Okay, now if you're ready to send your message out, then hit enter on my go. 3, 2, 1, go. Yes! Oh my gosh. I love these kinds of prompts with all of these floods of responses. Different people have different needs, expectations, and levels of experience. So what might seem welcoming and reasonable to you may be intense or demanding to others. Try to put yourself in other people's shoes. How do they see the world? People learn at a different pace and might not necessarily like what you like. Ooh, I really like that one, because half the time when I'm learning something slowly, it's because I don't care about the thing as much as my friend does. Ooh, this motto doesn't imply inclusivity. That's right. It just implies that there is a certain aspect of your own assumptions about how you should be treated. Everything depends on individual context. Not everyone has the same working and communication style as you. may have additional needs. Others might not want to be treated the way you do. Everyone's different. I was watching a TV show yesterday where an artist I love described themselves as a moldy fruit snack that you find under your bed. And I'm sure not all of us feel that way about ourselves. Cultural differences can be a big thing. It's very likely that others don't have the same background experience as I do. Yes, these are all such good examples of the way that just starting from a place of good intentions can't necessarily be enough, because making up for all of these differences in experience and context can take a lot of practice. And, again, as I mentioned, have found myself on both sides of this divide. The photo on the right was taken right after I cried my eyes out at a hack week that I went to in 2018. And this was a few years after I was a horrible tech witch who was making people cry when I was working at Apple. So, things can go all around. And I really like having actionable items that you can keep in your Rolodex when you're doing things. So I'm going to offer you all 4 hacks today that you can use when you're feeling potentially sharp and pointy in a group, or potentially vulnerable and soft. And I call these hacks because these are absolutely not hard and fast rules. These are even things that I forget to do most of the time when I'm working with people. The real value that I hope you find here is that these are ideas and types of inspiration that you can keep in your tool belt for when you are feeling some friction in your group dynamic. These are seed crystals that you can start growing your own understanding of how to be a good team member, more concretely than just treating people well. So my first hack is an easy one. It's just suggesting that we use collective pronouns instead of directed pronouns when talking to someone, especially when helping people debug things. This can really help promote a sense of teamwork and shared purpose, even if it's technically something that only one person is going to do and you're not responsible for. Now, you don't have to apply this as a rule in places it doesn't make sense, but here are some examples of where I think it can be really fun. So instead of telling someone, oh, this doesn't work because you need to install ice picks with pip, you can say, hey, let's install ice picks with pip. Now we're instantly changing this dynamic from a mistake that someone made and might feel ashamed about not knowing into a working relationship that we can carry forward together. Even if you're about to leave their computer and they're the ones who are going to be installing it, doesn't matter. Instead, they leave the interaction feeling good instead of feeling ashamed. And similarly, if you're helping someone debug something, instead of saying, when you run this code, you'll get a type error, you could say, when we run this code, we'll get a type error. Again, it's not your computer, it's not your code, but hey, by using these words, you are shifting the blame off of a person. And this might seem sort of pro forma or just like a minor change, but I've found, trust me, as a computer nerd who has spent a life trying to excitedly share things with people and have them think that I'm just a condescending jerk, this small change in how I communicate with people has actually helped a lot when there's a knowledge differential. So the next hack I have is to share softly. What do I mean by this? I think when we work together, we have a lot of questions and we have a lot of suggestions that we need to offer teammates. The art is really figuring out how to ask people questions and figure out what they know without making them feel like they're doing a PhD qualifying exam. And so softening our language in very specific ways can help us fit more diagnostic questions into an interaction than might otherwise seem reasonable, making someone feel like they're in front of a firing squad. I've found in general, it can help to shift the subject of questions off of the individual and onto the concept that we're tackling together. I always try to avoid absolutes and judgments of triviality. I never use absolutes, which, by the way, is a joke. I am joking. Um, and I also like to focus on subjective experience rather than objective fact. Almost all the time, I work really, really hard to figure out a few objective facts. And the vast majority of things I think I know are not peer-reviewed objective facts. They're just my subjective experience that I have found anecdotally to be true among me and my friends. So it can really help to emphasize that and clarify your thought process as to why you think things are the way they are, because then your teammate is learning a lot from you. So here are some examples of ways that we can soften things. Instead of asking someone, do you know what Python is? We could ask, what does Python mean to you? Or maybe, how familiar are you with Python? Now we're opening up this gray area in which a person doesn't have to judge which category they fall into in your eyes. You're giving them a chance to tell you more about themselves. Instead of saying it's just a matter of reading in a file to a Python script, we could say things like, there are a lot of resources to help with reading a file, or reading a file is a problem I know that we can tackle. Here, we're offering leads to continue the conversation rather than saying something is easy and we might need to already know how to do it in order to participate in this relationship. A big question, especially as a teacher, that I think you can come up against is the question, does that make sense? And this is a tough one because almost all the time when I ask whether something makes sense, I am feeling vulnerable and self-deprecating as the teacher. I'm worried that what I'm doing doesn't make sense to someone. But this can come off as, sort of drilling someone and seeing whether they are passing your on the spur of the moment verbal quiz. So other fun questions you can use here are things like, how do you feel about what I just showed? Or if, all of these words about feelings sound a little bit fuzzy, then you could ask something more concrete, like, did I explain that well? Because in that case, you are really saying what you're actually trying to, get through your diagnostic, which is, did I do a good job as a teammate helping you get up to speed on this thing? And then finally, this is something that comes up a lot with people who use tech a lot. We have very strong opinions about the right tools for the job. And so instead of saying things like, you should just be using NumPy, or if you hate NumPy, instead of saying NumPy is trash, you can add more context here. I've had a lot of good experiences with NumPy, or I'm worried about NumPy because I've seen it perform poorly in contexts like this. We're giving more context for our reasoning, and we are potentially tiptoeing around someone who's really excited about using this library, even if it's the wrong choice. We'll change their mind, but we'll do so without shutting them down. I've learned to do this mostly through telling people I don't like movies that it turns out people love a lot. I've learned to not admit I don't like a lot of things and instead offer critique of it. So, softening the way that you ask questions or give instructions is an ongoing process. And I'm sure that you'll find all sorts of principles at work in your own dynamics that are more useful to you than the ones I've offered. But I'm generally very interested in how this kind of thing works. And so if you have any thoughts about this, I'd love to hear them asynchronously, or if we have any time at the end of this session. So my next hack is for when we're feeling soft and vulnerable, and that is to celebrate our own personal goals. Now, this can be hard because we're in the context of teamwork where we're trying to do things with other people. But even when we're working with other people, it's important to remember that our version of success might be different from our teammates, and that's fine. So when we're working with other people, it can really help to sort of keep an internal list in our head of goals that we are going to celebrate, maybe internally or with someone that we like and have a good rapport with. So I really suggest figuring out goals that are achievable based on where you're starting from technically. And finding goals that give you lots of small wins along the way. If you're not used to working with a given type of database, if you've never used SQL before, then maybe just writing a query is a goal. And if you write a successful query and it executes, then there you go. That's a small win. You might have a lot more to do this week, but this is something that's worth taking the time to celebrate. And I think most importantly, well, actually, I think the most important thing here is finding a lot of small wins. I've personally found in situations where I'm facing a steep learning curve, the small wins are the like little rock handholds that I can get a grip onto so I don't just fall off the cliff face. But when it comes to, choosing what you are going to care about, I've found it really important to look at what I have the agency to achieve. And what I mean by this is if you want to get a lot of work done in the week, but you're working with other people, then ultimately that work speed is sort of up to not just you, but everyone around you. And so you're giving people the power, whether they want it or not, to keep you from achieving goals and make you feel dissatisfied with the week. So this is a good chance to review that and like try to find ways to feel satisfied and happy with practically what was ultimately able to happen. I would love to be able to get from University of Washington to Columbia City in the middle of rush hour in 20 minutes, but it's just not going to happen. That drive takes an hour and, I have to be okay with that. Or I have to invent a catapult that can shoot me across the city, but that's not going to happen in 1 week either. Just a very visceral example that I like showing of celebrating your own goals is this video game that I have a screenshot of called Q-Op. And in this video game, you're trying to run as fast as you can down a 100-meter dash, but the way you run is with individual control over the player's calf and thigh muscles. And so it might look sort of like they're failing to achieve much in this video, but the truth is this game is extraordinarily hard, and running even 6 meters is really practically difficult. If this game can load in time, then I'll show you how bad I am at it. But I encourage you to try this if you want an example of picking small goals. So most of the time I get less than 1 meter. And so that's the kind of thing where I might say, okay, I'm going to set a personal goal to myself of going more than 0.5 meters, which seems to be better than random. Maybe this will take me a while. But then I just got a small win. I figured it out. And even though I barely made one step, this is something that I can feel proud of. I encourage you to figure out a way to do something like this for your work this week. Because a hack week is not about running 100 meters. A hack week is about figuring out, new tools that you can use and a community that you can work with. I also encourage you, while you're at it, to celebrate your teammates' goals too, because it's one thing to be proud of what you've done, but it's another thing to hear other people be proud of you too. I think a concept that's useful to think about in this context is that of a hype man, which primarily comes from hip hop music. Pictured here, we have the most famous hype man of all time, Flavor Flav. And Flav is a backup rapper who supports the primary rappers with exclamations and interjections and attempts to increase the audience's excitement with call and response. This was very successful with Public Enemy, and it can be successful on your team too. Even if it seems too minor or too often to celebrate someone's goals, it's really not. We're really hard on ourselves when we learn something new, and we can use all of the validation that we can get. And the final hack that I have for all of you today is to remember that experience is beautifully subjective. So luckily, whatever our teammates' experience of working with us is largely unrelated to our perception of how they feel working with us. This includes if we feel like we're moving too slow or if we're being too intense. It's okay to make mistakes, technical and interpersonal mistakes. Because ultimately, unconditionally, everyone here wants everybody else to succeed. And even if it doesn't feel like that in the moment, it's important to return to and remember, because we're all doing our best and we're all practicing. And I think that practice is leading to some really spectacular results. So to recap, my first hack is for those of you who are feeling pointy, use we instead of you where it feels like it might be useful. Figure out how to share softly and soften your language. For those of us feeling vulnerable and soft, let's pick good small wins that we can achieve this week and celebrate them, and celebrate our goals, whether we achieve them or not. Celebrate that we're trying. And remember, experience is subjective. So that's my set of hacks. I hope that that is useful to all of you. And I am totally into thoughts or questions if anyone has them, because I love hearing about people's experiences thinking about this kind of stuff in their own right.
Let's thank Naomi.